Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Goldsboro City Council work session is called to order on May 3, 2021. Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Ham.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Councilmember Broadway.
Here.
Councilmember Polak.
Present.
Councilmember Matthews.
Present.
Councilmember Aycock.
Here.
Okay, item number 2 is adoption of the agenda. I do have one add to the agenda. Item 10 under Mayor and Council members' reports and recommendations. I want to add item I, which is the Military Appreciation Month proclamation. Does anyone else have an addition to the agenda? If not, motion to accept the agenda.
Move to adopt. Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Old business. I'm going to take the old business item, which is Tiffany Gardens Phase 2. If you recall, back in April, on April 5th, the matter of Phase 2 came before the council based on a recommendation by the Planning Commission to approve it. The council, after hearing discussions and so forth, denied the motion to approve. And so the matter at that time was a dead issue for all practical purposes, with the exception of the fact that the developer has the privilege to and right to bring it back to the council for rehearing 6 months after that date. However, there is also another issue there that we're in. If certain information that would be pertinent to the decision of the council in that particular hearing is made available, or was not made available, if you will, at the time, but came to light after that, the council may bring the matter back up before the 6-month period. I have been made aware of certain information that probably should have been presented during that process, but was not, that I believe the council should listen to and entertain, and then determine if we want to bring it back for rehearing before the 6-month period of time. What I'm going to give you then is, let me get my papers. I got bunches of them up here today. There were two things that I think the council should be made aware of. One is that the council back in April 1st, 2019, approved Phase 1 of Tiffany Gardens, and the rezoning, that is, the rezoning for Phase 1 of Tiffany Gardens. In March 16 of 2020, the council approved a loan from home funds of $500,000 to the developer for a interest rate of 2%. And just to be clear, that was for a 2% loan of $500,000, amortized over a 30-year loan, but due in 20 years. So those two items were not spoken to at the April meeting, which I think the council needs to be aware of. Let me just, for the matter of public disclosure, and say that I have had no communications with either the developer or the landowner. Neither one has spoken to me, nor have I spoken to them. This action is purely based on my own decision based on learning this information. Now, the council can discuss this. We can determine if we want to bring it back at the next meeting. If so, it'll be a full hearing with, just as it was back in April, meaning people will have an opportunity to come and speak and so forth. I'm going to say that if we want to bring it back, we should do so believing that there is sufficient information for us to look at it favorably. If not, then we don't need to bring it back, waste the party's time in hearing this. So let me just ask if there's any comment from the council as to what I've told you so far.
I've got one. I was reminded that I think in 2018, we denied a solar farm on that exact same land.
Right.
And the residents said they didn't want a solar farm, they wanted residential property there. And I did not remember that. And that became real relevant to me whenever I heard him say that. So, you know, that being said, you know, that's the only additional information I have at this time.
Anyone else?
I'd just like to say also that I voted for it the first time, but this is exactly what we needed. We have to make use of those home funds. Those funds are funds that if we don't use them, we lose them. And it's part of the HUD and all of those funds which come to us. I think that's right, sir. Is that?
I don't know anything about the home funds myself, but I just, if you're looking at me,
Yes,
No,
they
I'm looking at you. You're the only one back there.
I don't know the home funds. That's something you'd have to talk to the community development or
Yeah.
the finance office about. But as far as just the procedure itself is what I was asked to look at. The procedure itself is the council itself can have a rehearing within 6 months if you find that there's substantial circumstances that bear on the application that really was not, that you didn't know at the time. But that would take a motion, a second, and pass it. Then you'd have to go through the whole process again, advertise it, all that stuff, in my opinion. They can refile themselves in 6 months. I don't know the effect on the home funds. Jennifer can speak to that, or somebody else can speak to that. But as far as the procedure itself, you know, it's allowable under the rules that y'all can do that before the 6 months period is over.
And I'd just like to see us get utilization of those home funds. We have sat on them for a while. I'd like to see some utilization of those funds.
Let me just, for the sake of clarity, again, talk about the home program. And I'm going to just read you off this. The Home Investment Partnership program was created by the National Affordable Housing Act of 1990 to create local partnerships for providing decent, affordable housing to lower to moderate income households. And yet it goes on and on. So the point here is this money is going to be used for affordable housing. And so this is something that we've heard a lot of need about. And that I think is important to understand as well, that these funds are designed specifically for affordable housing programs.
Let's have a question, Mr. Aycock. I remember when they were talking about the solar farms and they were in opposition to that. So were the residents in that proximity, or were they desirous of having residential? So
That's what they said they wanted that property to be used for, was residences.
Okay.
Now, it didn't speak to apartments, but apartments are residences just like single home dwellings are.
Right.
But they're more affordable as a general rule.
Yes, sir.
And so it was also the people right on Thoroughfare Road in Central Heights, about the first half mile down there.
Those
were the people that were
wanted.
asking for no solar farm.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments they want to make?
Well, what I wanted to say is that I voted against it last time. And talk with my constituents. I do understand affordable housing, and we do need that, and I advocate that. I voted against it because there are 480 students at Eastern Wayne Middle, and I am aware that they had to redo their traffic pattern because it was so much traffic. There were kids, running. There's a store over there, and then there's a fire station. And the safety of the kids was a concern for me. I've had a child that was hit by a car, and that's no fun. Also, I listened to the people that came, and everyone that came did not want it. There was not one person, if I recall, that came to speak that said that they wanted it. But after speaking to the community, I think it's something that we need to look at.
So I have a question, just so I'm clear. When we voted to approve this in 2019, right?
Phase one.
Phase 1.
Yes.
Did that tie us into a phase 2? So technically, if the developer did nothing wrong or didn't violate any of that criteria, then that means we can not approve it, but because they did not violate any of that criteria, we have no grounds to not approve it. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that
That's
how
a little
this is?
different than a conditional use permit where you have
Okay.
to have those reasons.
Okay,
The rezoning, you don't.
This
That's
is
why-
something different.
Yeah, that's why we didn't go back through the specific motion, and if it was made correctly and cited the facts that would be
Okay.
necessary. So rezoning, you can just say, no, we don't want to do it, and deny it like occurred.
Okay.
But then, again, under the way the code is written, if there's substantial information or circumstances that, had y'all known about it, would have maybe affected your decision-making at the time, you can allow the rezoning to be reheard now before the 6-month period runs.
okay.
Okay?
I got a question for Jennifer.
Can I clarify? Ms.
Sure.
Matthews? As I think I heard you were saying in reference to phase 1,
Yeah.
And the rezoning took place prior to receiving the conditional use permit. So the zoning was in place in 2019, and well, no, I believe it came. I misunderstood you. And then the home funds were applied for or
March
granted
of
in
2020.
2020. But at the time of 2019, I'm 100% sure that we required a conditional use permit for multifamily in the excess of 3 units, as we do now. But I'd have to go back and check my records. But the rezoning was approved in 2019 with the understanding that it would be for multifamily standards. So it was approved at that time. And if I recall correctly, at the public hearing, there were not many that came out in opposition regarding that location. There has always been a trending opposition for any multifamily proposed development along Color Best, just not Central Heights Road area.
Okay, and while you're here, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So there was talk about sidewalks and expansions and different things like that that had not been done or that is responsible for being done. I'm just trying to give the residents some peace of mind if the board decides to move forward with this and saying some of those things that you were afraid of are things that are going to be taken care of or done. We can't control the number of people, that's how many people are going to be there, but we can put some of those concerns to rest about the traffic and if DOT or the sidewalks or whatever's supposed to be happening actually happens, and we make sure that that happens.
For the project on Central Heights Road, Phase 1, they are requiring there to be turn lanes put
Okay.
in there.
For
The
this
road-
project, what we're talking about.
For Phase 1.
Uh-huh.
Phase 2, because it's on Thoroughfare Road.
Okay.
The traffic along Thoroughfare Road and having an entrance off Thoroughfare Road for
Okay.
Phase 2 does not warrant any improvements.
Okay.
But they do have to do improvements along Central Heights Road for Phase 1.
Okay,
And Phase 1 is the one that's been approved, has the conditional, or has the permits necessary to move forward with construction.
okay.
So those
okay.
road improvements will be put in prior to Phase 2 development,
Okay,
if approved.
okay.
My question is, if we approve it, will they ask to be annexed into the city?
They would have to, because water and sewer are available. And just to be clear on the, if the developer, as I have spoken with the developer, if they were to get approved, they have missed kind of their window for this, what I call this year's tax credits in which they would be applying for. So, but if they have the understanding of if phase 2 were to be approved, and they missed that cycle, but that was enough confidence for them to kind of stay in the area, and then they will apply for those tax credits the following year. So that would be FY 2022. I think the deadline, that's why you had your agenda set the way it was. The deadline for those developers applying for those tax credits is sometime in May. And he obviously missed that with the denial.
Now, how many other apartment complexes does this developer have in Goldsboro?
The first one that I'm aware of is the phase 1 that was approved in 2019.
Weren't they also the developer of the big one on New Hook Road?
Not to my knowledge.
I think they were.
And he had applied several times for property along Kyler Best, and it was denied. But I'm not aware of anything on New Hope Road since I've been in this position and working with that developer.
Okay.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Well, this is not a vote to approve, but I would like to show of hands for those people, members of the council who would like to bring the item back for rehearing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mayor Pro Tem Ham, I think we're gonna need a motion and a second.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, then.
And so, yes.
Okay. All right, then I'll make a motion that we bring the item of Tiffany Gardens Phase 2 back for discussion on the next council meeting on May 17th.
For a rehearing?
For a rehearing.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Hold on, I think there may be some discussion.
Can we hold 1 second, please, Jennifer?
Mayor Pro Tem, the hearing would have to be in June for proper advertisement, so it would not be able to come back in May, because those deadlines have passed. So they wouldn't be reheard if approved until the June public hearing date.
Okay. Would that be the first meeting in June?
Your second meeting in
Second
June.
meeting in June.
And I would just cite in your motion that you're doing this based upon the language in 2.6.10 of the code.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Substantial.
Yeah. Per section 2.6.10, rehearing a rezoning request of the Unified Development Ordinance.
And so the motion is, your motion is that saying, are y'all agreeing that there's a substantial circumstances bearing on the application, and therefore we want to have it reheard? Is that your motion and what it's
Yes.
based on?
Yes, sir.
All right, just make sure that was clear in the record, and then y'all second that.
Yes, we
And I'll
did.
second it again.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Now, all those in favor of approving the motion to bring it back, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, next item is the public comment period discussion. And again, this is an issue that we've talked about and discussed before. We have made certain changes recently to the public comment period policy, but that included changing the total time allocated from 35 minutes to 30 minutes, and a speaking time per speaker from 5 to 3 minutes. But the third item that was discussed was the manner of how we conduct the public speaking. And Councilmember Jones had some specific issues she wanted to talk about. She has drafted up a proposed policy change to that effect. And you have a copy, and I'm going to let you speak, Ms. Jones.
Thank you. And City Council, this draft is not a whole lot different from what we had. The only difference is it spells out the purpose, the goals, and it references the North Carolina General Statutes. The only thing that is actually different is 6, 7, and 8. And we're all intelligent people, and so you can read, so I'm not going to read all that to you, but We talked about the word reasonable, we talked about the word provision, and so I wanted to make it softer. I want us all to work together to make this a productive and effective meeting and orderly. So number 6, everything else is pretty much the same. Number 6, you can read that it says speakers shall refrain from personal attacks or threats directed toward a council member, the mayor, city staff, or members of the public. Number 7 says speakers shall be civil and courteous in their language and presentation at all times. Speakers should not expect the council members to comment or respond to their comments during the meeting. Now, this was already in your policies, October 19th, 2020. I think the operative word there is not expected. It doesn't mean that you can't, but it means that you're not expected to. Then the mayor or presiding officer may, however, request the city manager's office to follow up with a speaker after the meeting to provide additional information to the council at a later date if that's, something that need be. The number 9 is the same that you had. Number 10 is different. That the individuals, if they continue to be egregious, that they can be asked to leave. And number 11 was added in because it is a North Carolina statute. And it wasn't in our policies before. And I really think it's very important that the public know that there are statutes and guidelines that are made at the legislation that we are supposed to follow. And so that's why I put those things there, and that's why I referenced the statutes of public period during public comment period and the disruption of official meetings. That's why I added those references there. And you may go back and check them out. They're there. And this is nothing that I have made up. This is legislation. And I think the public needs to know that as well. So.
Before I ask for comment, I will say that our city attorney has reviewed this draft, and so it has gone through his office. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
So my concern with this, thank you, Ms. Jones, for taking the time to draft this up. Number 5, for the public who cannot see this, a person may speak only if they have signed up to speak in advance of the public comment period. I have some issues with that because we have people who work all day. We have people who are in school all day. We got people who life happens to every day. And just the mere fact that our residents have taken interest enough to come to our meetings to speak, I don't think we should put any restraints on that to say if you have not signed up, you do not speak. If I'm just getting off work and I see something, or I want to rush to the council meeting, or if I have plans to come here and I hear something that I would like to speak on because it directly affects me or what have you, I want to be able to have access to that. And I just think it's very limiting to allow that. I am also aware, and I hope you guys have looked at the attachments that came through with another part of the public comment policy where I'm disappointed because all of those attachments supported the majority in wanting to do a sign-in. But I did a little bit more research, and I found other municipalities who do not require a sign-in. And those who do require a sign-in allow people to sign in right up until the very end of the public comment period. So I think we need to have some flexibility. I don't agree with the sign-in, period. But if that's something that the majority is going to go with, I don't think it should be limited to say you have to do it before that public comment. Number 6, speakers shall refrain from personal attacks and or threats. Well, to me, that's all a matter of perspective. I can come up here and I can say, or someone can come and say, Councilwoman Matthews, you voted against this, that, and the third, and you didn't take into consideration how that affects me and my family. And I can say, oh my gosh, you hurt my feelings, you're attacking me. So then what happens? Now we have this game where if my personal feelings are hurt, or if I feel like someone is directing a comment to me, I have the ability to silence them. And I don't think that's fair. I think there are other issues or procedures that you mentioned here with the decorum and with residents conducting themselves in a certain manner that fits that bill without having to use the word or attacks or threats, because there's been people up here who felt attacked, who felt threatened, and it was mere accountability. And that's not fair to our residents. And that's something that we need to look at. So I don't particularly like those words, attacks or threats, directed toward any council member, mayor, because to me that reads that I'm just supposed to address the board at all. I have to be careful with not saying my feelings. I have to walk on eggshells, and I just don't think we should ask that of our residents. And asking them for an email too, I think is a bit much. We already get their name, we already get their address. I think that shouldn't be mandatory. I think it should be optional if they want to.
Well, it should say if applicable.
So that means if they have one.
Yeah.
I want it to be clear that if they do. And when we say sign in, here's another question that we didn't talk about. So board, if I want to speak and I sign in and you want me to tell you what I want to talk about, and I don't want to tell you what I want to talk about, do I get to speak?
Well,
I dare not tell them they can't.
I took that out. We talked about that before, and it just said to sign up. I do think that you have to have some accountability of what you to sign up. I do understand you saying that whenever they get off work that they can come at any time. I think that's a little bit too lax, but I worked through these and I consulted several entities. It is here for us to look at. My concern is a decorum. We as city council people have to have thick skin. So I can't automatically think that you are threatening me. If Councilman Taj said, well, Ms. Jones, I think that you are divisive and you're not fair and you do this and you do that. I can't, that's his opinion. But I don't consider it as a threat. It's something that I will have to take a look at and say, well, where did he come to this conclusion? Why did he think this, So there again, too, we signed up for this, many of us, and some were appointed, but we signed up for this. So we have to have a little thicker skin. And I think from what I have been seeing in the past 2 years or 3 years, all of you have thick skin, because I've seen so much go on that I felt that was not good decorum.
Ms. Jones, I strongly disagree with you there. And if you have been watching us, you have known that this board has accused residents, they have accused other council members of attacking them, of threatening them. That has happened the entire time I've been on the board, and it's happened before I got here. So that could possibly have been a meeting that you missed. My only issue is that number 5, I don't think we should make people responsible for signing in before a meeting. I don't think we should identify attacks or threats in it either. I think if we're telling people to practice decorum and we're telling them to be respectful and we're trusting our residents to do the right thing, I think that's it's way too on the line, gray area for me, just based on personal experience and what I have seen from this board just in the past couple of years.
Well, for me, stating that item was only spelling it out as a form of decorum.
let me make a comment. There is critique of someone or their actions, and then there's a threat to someone. And I think we've experienced both of those. And what one may perceive as a critique, another might perceive as a threat. But there have been some very direct threats made to people in here. And while you have a First Amendment right to speak, there are certain things that should be considered not acceptable in this setting. Go back to the item 5, Ms. Jones, is signing in at the at this location acceptable to you?
Well, sure. I mean, I just feel that we need to know who's signing in. We need to know who's speaking.
Yeah, well, yeah, we do know, because I tried to ask the speaker to give the clerk their name and address and so forth. But
Yes.
what you're speaking of here is that is the time that I'm concerned with.
Okay.
So,
We're all working together to make this better.
So I have a question. So the number 5, we're doing it, but you're saying in advance. I mean, as far as before the meeting night to know what they're talking?
No, not before the meeting night, and maybe that needs to be spelled out. We want you to sign up. When you get here, sign up.
Okay, so when you walk through the
Yeah,
door.
yes.
Okay.
I think it'd be nice just to know the name and the subject of what they're going to speak. What they say is fine, we're ready to hear it, but I don't see anything wrong with them submitting their name and what their subject is. That's,
Now, my question on that, and when I was a city employee in 2016 actually, a lot of my colleagues would try to deter me from talking because they would say, man, you can get in trouble, but I was never fearful of what I said because I felt justified in everything I said on the other side of the podium. And I know a lot of people don't have the courage until they hear other people speak on certain topics. And sometimes you have to be the leader in a conversation. Somebody may piggyback off a comment that they didn't initially have the courage to speak on, and it may not have been something they wrote in on their sign-in, and they kind of deviated from that because they were more passionate about another topic. So I think we make it too black and white in that regard, that we are kind of stifling the voices, Councilman Matthews has said before. I just think we leave it to 3 minutes, have them sign in saying their name as we've done in the past, address, and there may be some redundancy in the conversation, but somebody may hear something that triggered something, and they say, well, okay, the previous person might have spoke on this, but I'm more passionate about this topic now, so now I want to speak on this issue. So I think if we say that we're boxing them into they have to speak on what they initially said they were going to speak in, then it kind of minimizes what they want to say. So I think we just leave that one alone and just say if they sign in using their name and their address like we've been doing.
And if you notice, when we first talked about it the first time, I did say topic.
Mm-hmm.
But as y'all noticed, I didn't put topic
Right.
because after talking to constituents, they said, well, we might get up there and we might start talking, and then we bring something else up. So is that wrong?
I don't think that's
So that wouldn't be wrong. So that would cancel out putting topic, because if I get up here and I want to talk about water, and then later on I talk about some potholes, So I consider that because I do listen to the people in my district, and we have talked about this. So thank you very much. I think that's good.
Yes, sir.
So I was just gonna say, if on number 2, each speaker will identify himself, herself by stating their name and address, you've really covered, number 5 to some degree.
Right. That's what I was trying to clarify.
Okay.
And if you're allowing them to just,
Right. That's
show
all
up
you're
and
asking
speak,
for.
you don't need a sign-up sheet because
They're gonna do that
they're
anyway.
gonna mention their name and
Okay.
address to the clerk. But what it does, the sign-up sheet does allow you to do is understand how many people you got waiting to talk.
Gotcha.
You know,
And we
let's
need
say you
that.
got 10 people or
There you
6
go.
people, right? That allows council to know how much they can talk about the issue at that time as opposed to bringing it up at another council meeting.
Right.
So that, it serves some value in that capacity.
Or if someone gets here and they've been here, 30 minutes prior to the meeting and they signed in, it would be so that they get an opportunity to speak since they were here. Whereas if they're just kind of sitting in the audience, someone else, and no sign-in sheet, someone else who may have just gotten here may be able to speak before them. And if you go over that 30 minutes, then they weren't able to
First come,
speak.
first served kind of thing.
Exactly.
And that's what I spoke on before. You may have 6 or 7 people, and that person's been waiting for 2 months to speak. They're not, so I would recommend if we have, when they come in and they're on alert, that there is a notebook or tablet or whatever, they put their name, that way someone just couldn't jump in front of that person that's number 2. And because that's happened a lot of times. I've seen elderly women with bad knees and men as well. They get up here, and then there's 6 people that are exhausted all the time, and then they don't get to speak. And they're jumped out of order because certain people may be closer to the mic, and you see people, and they don't realize the process, and the time is gone before they get there, and they actually might have been here before someone else. So I do think that needs to be a sheet that there is at least an order of,
Yes.
of the people that speak.
I agree.
So I mean, it's
Yes,
unfair
I
to somebody
agree.
that's been waiting
I agree
months to
with that.
speak, and they.
But I think you still should allow, if, there's additional time remaining.
Oh,
if
yeah,
anyone
definitely
else is
that,
in
but-
the audience.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if it's first come, first served, I mean, I have been sitting in rooms where it's like popcorn, and then I've been sitting in rooms where people are looking around, are you going to speak, you going to speak? My thing is this, I can't get here 30 minutes. I can't sit in this room for 30 minutes because I just got off work at 6:30. I just got off at 7. And while I get what you guys are saying, then maybe if we find that to be an issue, because I've been watching council meetings a long time, and very seldom have I seen a whole lot of people coming up at one given time to talk. If we see that to be an issue, then why don't we see what else we can do? I'd much rather, instead of that, say, okay, do we need to add 5 minutes to our public comment section? Do we need to add 10 minutes to our public comment section? Do we need to take this issue and add it to our agenda so we can talk about it again? So instead of limiting, let's listen to the people and broaden up our borders instead of closing them together, is what I'm saying. I mean, if it's first come, first served, then that's what happens. You're trying to get concert tickets, you get there early so you can, hey, I'm the first one to grab it. And then that's just something that our residents are gonna have to understand. You're right. I would hate for someone to have the intention to speak and don't get a chance to speak. But I also want to encourage them to come back. I want to encourage them to email their representative. I want to encourage them to communicate that issue. They don't have to wait until 2 weeks to talk about it again. Let's make ourselves readily available even after the meeting. There's someone here who wants to speak, they didn't get a chance to say anything. Hey, let's talk about it. I'm willing to take some time to do that, and I think all of us should be willing to take some time to do that. So do you think 30 minutes is enough? Then let's make it 35. Let's make it 40. But we don't want to do that, I ain't gonna say we. The board has said they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to expand the time.
Ms. Jones, Mr. Salmon suggested that 5 and 2, item 5 and 2 are redundant in some sense. Would you be amenable to deleting number 5?
Oh, yes.
So the public knows number 5 is a person, I'm sorry if this is muffled. A person may speak only if they have signed up to speak in advance of the public comment period.
So is that what you're saying?
Well, I was just mentioning that if you didn't want to have them sign up, you didn't need it. You're gonna understand by number 2, they're gonna state their name and what their address is.
Well, that's
But if
still
you wanna have a
signing
sign
up.
up,
That's still signing up. They would still have to have a sheet out there. Is that correct?
No, that's not what he's saying.
that's what we
They're
gotta
supposed to
understand.
say their name and address when they come, that they're supposed to do that. So if we make sure we get them to do that, because some people don't, and some people, we know some people and they don't say it, so we just have to remind residents, that they have to give that for our clerk and for record purposes.
Well, I think our clerk needs to know.
I think it was been very effective to have a list, so we know
Yes.
who's come and who's
Yes.
gonna speak when.
I
And we
agree.
can kind of line them up.
Yeah, that's what I'm agreeing to.
I think it's like Taj said, Councilman Polak said, you know, there's some older people who come here to speak, and they can't rise fast enough to get up here before somebody
That's
else gets
true.
up here. You know, and I want to give everybody the opportunity.
Me too.
So how about this? Because I like that. I want to give everybody the opportunity. Here's an idea. If we come to the close of our 30 minutes and there's some people in this room who have not spoken, then why don't we allot another however many minutes for that particular speaker? Let's not end the night with our residents coming here and not being heard. Let's do that.
The problem you have with that, most of the time, you will get one speaker that will speak 10 minutes or 12 minutes.
3 minutes, council member. They only have 3 minutes.
I have seen them speak 8 and 9 and 10 minutes and change the subject 3 times.
They have
Now,
been
that's
allowed.
our fault. I'm not saying.
Exactly.
That is our fault if we allow that.
Right.
But if we have any discipline at all, then that discipline has to be at that 3 minutes. And I have seen in 10 years, somebody rotate out 3 times in the same session with 3 different subjects because of another subject. And he kept about 4 other people from speaking.
That was the board's fault because that was in your policy that you're not supposed to do that. So that was the board's fault. I'm not blaming our residents for doing that when this board didn't hold them accountable for
If
doing
we're
it.
allowing them to do it, all I'm saying is the chair or the board has got to say, and we've got to enforce that 3 minutes.
I agree.
Whether it's 30 or 35, it doesn't matter. But we don't need the soliloquies and the monologues that we get sometimes that really serve no purpose.
Well, I think everybody's voice serves a purpose. I have to disagree. But are you agreeing that we can give more time? What do you say? Are you agreeing to that?
I've just seen it happen over the years. And
The item 4 limits the speaker to 1 time per public comment period. So if that's enforced, that would negate what you just said.
I think it would too. I mean, and I don't mind talking to anybody, but I don't think that you or any of us have, if we've got a particular district problem, then that person needs to come to us, and I'm happy to answer any email and go to fight for it. That's what I'm interested in.
I'll speak to Ms. Matthews' comment about extending the speaking period. I think we get in trouble there if we just have a policy that at the end of 30 minutes, if we got other people to speak, well, we're going to just let it go until the last person standing speaks. I would rather us to say, okay, instead of 30 minutes, we're going to move it to 45 minutes and then cut it off at 45 minutes.
I like what City of Williamston did. I wish this would have been included in our attachment. They actually do an additional 5 to 10 minutes or 5 minutes for anyone who wasn't able to speak. They have a time in which they speak, and then they have an additional 5 minutes for anyone who hasn't. Now it's at the discretion of the chairperson to say, okay, we only have a limited amount of time. We want to try to get as much heard in these 5 minutes. So I'm just saying we can be innovative and creative. I agree we shouldn't just, let it go on all into the wee hours of the morning. That's not what I'm saying, and I don't even think we'll ever have that problem. But I'm trying to satisfy the issue of Mr. Aycock here about our elderly who can't pop up, and I agree, they can't pop up. So, let's see how we can accommodate those people who made it their business to show up and speak. I don't think they should leave not being heard. So how can we accommodate it is all I'm saying.
Can you make a specific suggestion, not a motion per se at this point, but a suggestion as to the language that would suit your
City managers.
Oh, sorry.
I could, maybe on item 3, where it says a total public comment period would not exceed 30 minutes at any regular scheduled council meeting unless otherwise authorized by council. Just gives you the opportunity to vote on whether you want to extend the time period or not.
I think that would work, and again, it's up to the chair or whoever's doing it to enforce that policy. I mean,
Unless
You got one
authorized
sheriff.
by,
Unless
The chair.
otherwise authorized by council, so you would have to vote, or you could leave it up to the chair unless otherwise authorized by the mayor.
how about the presiding officer? So, item 3 would be, each speaker will be given 3 minutes to offer comments or suggestions regarding the city. The total public comment period will not exceed 30 minutes at any regular scheduled council meeting unless authorized by the presiding officer. Any comment? Okay.
That's good.
And I think too, we can gauge, I like that. But I think too, we can gauge that also by looking at the attendance tonight, and our average, our average attendance in public comment period. And like I said, if there's 2 or 3 people that didn't get to speak, can give them their 3 minutes. But if there's like 30 or 40 people in the crowd that, you know, there's got to be some kind of cap. And I can assure you 90%, because I put my personal cell phone on my business card. It might, Ms. Laura told me that might not be a good idea, but I tell you, it's helpful to me because these are direct. I check my text more than I check my email, and this is something personal to me. As I walk down the street, you know, people ask me questions personally. I've not had one person from District 3 since I've been in office address anything to me at that podium that they haven't spoken to me directly, and I like that personal relationship. But I do agree that if there are maybe 2 or 3 people that have not gotten the opportunity to speak, and we ask them how many more want to speak, and we say, okay, give them up to, and that'll be at the discretion that night of that particular meeting. So I'm in agreement to that. That's all I have.
So at this point, we've got 2 changes. One, we delete item 5, and item 3, added unless authorized by the presiding officer. Is there any further suggestions to changes? If not, do I have a motion to approve the rules of decorum for the public policy, public speaking policy as presented with the changes I just read?
So move.
Second.
You have it made, motion made and second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of accepting it as I stated, raise your hand. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Okay. New business. Planning, Unified Development Ordinance update.
Good evening. In preparation for the public hearing that's going to be held regarding the ordinance amendments, that being the Unified Development Ordinance update that's going to be held on May 17th, I wanted to do a very quick brief or recap on where we are with the consultant regarding the ordinance amendments. Just a little refresher, just so that it's not cold to you at the public hearing on May 17th. Just to summarize, the major amendment is due to the Chapter 160D, which is State Legislature updated the statewide zoning enabling legislation. This is a mandatory update for all counties, cities, and towns, And this new chapter 160D consolidates and clarifies local land use regulation. And then our state deadline for compliance is July 1 of this year. Currently, our project schedule, if you recall, we had the consultant here at your March 1st meeting, and we kind of went over the suggested changes and got council input with regards to those recommended changes and how to move forward with finalizing the draft document. That draft document was given to staff for review early in April. We have completed that review, and we are ready for the final draft to be released to the public for public comment, as well as a public hearing on May 17th. After the public hearing on May 17th, the consultant will present to the Planning Commission at their meeting for recommendation and for City Council final adoption on June 7th. Just the major changes that you're going to see is, if you recall, the consultant did inform you that there's kind of 3 buckets that the development review process is going into. We classify those as administrative, legislative, and quasi-judicial. Currently, site plans do come before Planning Commission and City Council, and it was recommended that all site plans, regardless of size, and no more than 20% of a modification being requested, and that will address parking and landscaping requirements of our Unified Development Ordinance, will now be done at staff level, as well as all subdivision and plats. So site plans and subdivision plats, or final subdivision plats and minor subdivision plats, will be held at administrative level. Your legislative process, which is a public hearing, is conditional and conventional rezonings and any ordinance amendments. Conditional rezonings, they will typically, we require a site plan. Currently, when we have a conditional use district, is what we refer to them now, we will just require a conceptual master plan at time of conditional rezonings. And then if the rezoning is approved, then the site plan will come back to staff at a more detailed, kind of your grading, your drainage, your erosion control, lighting, any of those full site plans, and they will be approved at staff level. So that kind of be that process. And then you have the third bucket, which is a quasi-judicial. Those are currently your conditional use permits that you see today. The new language for that, they'll now be referred to as special use permits. They will be 2-tiered. Currently, special use permits in our UDO are approved by the Board of Adjustment, and that is typically like a major home occupation. That's been about the only special use permit that's gone to Board of Adjustment. So that will remain as a tier 1, and then a tier 2 is what we consider a major special use permit, and those are council approved. So those will be, as you see today, it's just we will refer to them as special use permits. It was decided at your March 1st meeting that all variances, or what we refer to today as modifications, so in the excess of 20% modification, that we will now look at staff approving those up to 20% modification, will now go to Board of Adjustment. So that will no longer come before City Council. The Board of Adjustment will make any recommendations or approvals or denials on modifications and or what we'll refer to as variances. The additional updates that was included as part of the work that we discussed with the consultant was we did update our permitted uses table. So if you look in the document today, you would technically see a C for conditional use permit. That will change to an S1 or an S2. So that'll be things you see changing. There's also some language we put in there with some more current uses in today's world with regards to times change, right? So we've had uses change over the years. So we've made sure to include those within similar categories of similar uses today. Supplemental regulations will change. One of the main ones we did add was special events, kind of temporary uses, think tent revivals, special outdoor events or indoor events where it's mass gatherings, those sort of things. We did add those within supplemental regulations. Parking standards did change with regards to internet cafes, as well as the parking boundary downtown where parking is exempt. We did extend that to Elm Street. Currently it stops at Chestnut. And then obviously all the definitions have been updated to reference any new language that has been put in the code with regards to Chapter 160D and new uses within the permitted uses table. The draft document will be available on the city's website, and I also have a link that I can provide each council member, and/or I'll share it with the city manager, and he will include that to you guys, whether it would be in personally, directly to you, or within a weekly update for you to review the document. The document it's this thick. It has strike-through language in it, or it shows you the strike-through and it'll show you the new language. I will be happy to make you a copy if you like to have your hands on it. I like to have my hands on it, so that's just my preferred method of review versus going through a screen. If you would just let the manager's office know, or Melissa, I will make sure to make you a copy prior to the 17th, and you can review that. And as well, the public is welcome to come to the planning department and can review the document in its entirety as a hard copy as well. But we will make sure proper access is given to everyone. Just let us know which preferred method you would like to have.
Does the draft that's on the city website have the strike-throughs in it?
That would be the one that we upload, yes, sir. I have a clean version, but I would prefer people to see the actual language that's striked through and then the new language being
It's a
proposed.
lot of paper to waste.
It is a lot of paper, but I've gone through every single page, and it's easier for me to see that strike through. I just like having my hands on it, but some people like being behind the screen, and that's fine too. We can make sure it's available in whatever way you prefer. But that's all. Unless you have any questions for me, the consultant will be here at May 17th, and they will go through it in just a little bit more detail, but that is the highlights of the document. Any questions for me?
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd like to present council at this time and for citizen information on the American Rescue Plan and my proposed funding priorities. Please keep in mind local governments have not received detailed guidance from the U.S. Treasury or North Carolina State government on how this funding must be spent. As I was researching the American Rescue Plan, I found the following 3 slides on the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners website. It provides good background information and perspective. I modified them slightly to include more city-specific information. On this slide, you'll see there have been 3 stimulus packages so far. We had the CARES Act in March of 2020 for $2.2 trillion, Consolidated Appropriations Act in December of 2020 for $2.3 trillion, and the American Rescue Plan now signed in 11 March for $1.9 trillion. On the left, you'll see that local governments received $300 million in North Carolina from the CARES Act. $150 million was given to the counties, and then $150 million was in reserve. And when the reserve was released, the municipalities, local governments, got $75 million, of which Goldsboro received $697,000, of which most has been spent except for some small business grants that remain. And when the Consolidated Appropriations Act was passed, they extended that deadline for utilizing those funds from December of 2020 to December 31st of 2021. So we will expend those funds. The American Rescue Plan is a significant increase to that amount of funding. You'll see state and local governments receive $350 billion, $130 billion to county and municipal governments. $5.3 billion is going to go to the North Carolina state government, $2 billion directly to North Carolina counties, and $1.3 billion to North Carolina municipalities. In all, this North Carolina state is set to get close to $9 billion. As I said, the guidance is, the specific guidance is TBD, but we are expecting to receive directly from the U.S. Treasury half of the allocation within 60 days, which means by 11 May, which for us is 8.7 million, half 4.375. The eligible uses laid out so far in legislation is to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, to provide premium pay to eligible employees for essential work, and to address certain revenue reductions, or to make infrastructure investments in water, sewer, and broadband. And it's those last 2 that I think we should focus on. There are but a few restrictions so far. You can't put this money into a pension fund, and you can't use it to offset revenues if council were to decide to do a tax decrease. And these funds will be available until December 31st of 2024, 3.5 years from now. This slide represents some of the other monies that aren't necessarily coming direct to the city of Goldsboro. I won't go into the details, but you can see public health, vaccines, education funding, food assistance, rental and utility assistance, economic impact, unemployment benefits, small business administration assistance. All this is coming down separate from the 8.7 million. So why people, and there is a need for this funding, that should come down through the state and the county and other means. For instance, on the rental and utility assistance, we are expecting to get HUD funds direct to us for $908,000. So we will be able to spend that in addition to the 8.7 million. So Wayne County in local government funding is expecting to get close to 23.9 million. As I mentioned, the city 8.7 million. Proposed city funding priorities. I think we need to consider stabilizing our budget next year and going forward. In the FY 2021 general fund, we reduced the budget by almost $1 million because of expected revenue losses. And as you heard Catherine brief during the retreat, what we projected for revenue and what we projected for expenses is going to be pretty close. But that came with some pain. We reduced operations and maintenance by about 25 to 50%, depending on the department and the need. I think we need to consider restoring those cuts in the budget and purchasing critical must-have and essential should-have equipment that wasn't purchased last year. So we're in the midst of the budget process right now. We'll take a good look at that, and we'll provide you information when the manager's recommended budget is published. But I also think we need to look at strategic infrastructure investments and begin to address what Mike talked about at your council retreat. 230 plus million identified in capital improvement plan requirements over the next 10 years. And as Mike briefed you, if we don't help ourselves, we can't expect the feds or the state government to help us. So we need to look at this very closely. The rate increases that were done last year only paid for your operating costs, and they may reduce your rate increase going forward if we address this issue. I'll tell you that the local staff are also working with regional partners, North Carolina State, the local government commission, the Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Water Infrastructure. We're working with the local towns and cities, Eureka, Pikeville, Fremont, Mount Olive, to address capital improvement plan shortfalls in water and sewer. This is a huge issue. Some of these towns have been absorbed by the LGC because, I think in part, because of water and sewer expenses, and we need to get after this. So, in talking to the staff, these are the priorities we see. There's a phase 3 sewer and rehabilitation replacement project for $5.2 million that has been looked at. This would replace existing sanitary sewer lines in the northern part of the city and mitigate our I&I infiltration and inflow. So you may recall that in January, February, and March of this year, we have exceeded the capacity at our water reclamation facility, 120%. When you reach 80%, you have to have a plan to fix that. When you reach 90%, that plan needs to be in place. We have been below that in the past, but with the excessive rainfall and the I&I that's happening, we need to look at this or we won't be able to grow in the future. The number 2 priority is a 2019 water system improvement for $3 million. This has been on the books since then, being looked at. Replace undersized water mains, roughly 28,000 linear feet, with 6-inch mains throughout the city. Right now, Mike has applied for and received a 2% loan pending council approval. We haven't brought this to council because we have to get our audits updated before we can address this. Number 3 priority, move Little Cherry, Big Cherry sewer pump stations out of the floodplain, another $3 million project. We have a DWI, a SODRA loan at 0% this time that we would bring back to council for approval once we get our audits complete. And again, this will reduce I&I, which deals with your top problem where you're getting close to, we had 120% over the last 3 months and pushing the 80% mark of your sewer. Other projects of significance, replacing UV disinfection system, 1.1 million. Replacing pump station bar screens at $225,000 each. The Westbrook pump station generator, $500,000. New radios and telemetry, $250,000. And then there's a big project down there for the Highway 117 pump station for $14.3 million. On this page, there's a total of $28.5 million worth of requirements going forward. And you haven't even begun to address the need for a new water treatment plant, estimated at $80 million. These are pictures of the areas where the work would be done. The number one priority in the north. Number two priority is kind of throughout the central portion of the city, all those red lines there. This is the Big Cherry, Little Cherry. You can see flooding during the storm previously, so if you know you got cracks in those pipes, that water, storm water, is going right into your sewer system and you're having to treat it. And the expenses of that for electricity, etc., are significant. So what Mike presented from our Stantec contractors in the February offsite was a 20% rate increase. If we do the $8.2 million, number one and number two priorities, Stantec has come back and said in the first year, you can probably get by with a 15% rate increase. And take a look in your out years, it's slightly increased. I mean, we have to keep paying these kinds of costs just to get us up where we need to be. Remember, in the past, over the last 10 years, we had minimal rate increases that we're trying to catch up for. And if you do the 20% rate increase this coming year, you're just getting up to average with local governments.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So that's my question. And I'm new up here, but just looking at these graphs, why was there such minimal or incremental rate increases? And now it's just like we come to I
can't answer that. I wasn't here.
That should have been foreseen years ago. I mean, I think the last report, the bar screens should have been replaced in the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, why didn't we have a projection of any of this? And it's almost like the can's been kicked down the road. Now people are going to have to absorb such a high. I just can't foresee years of anyone in this capacity to know that these things, I mean, we know the water treatment plant is old. It's been old for decades, been outdated for decades. But now all these people, taxpayers, are going to have to absorb such an increase due to, like you said, incremental rating. I mean, had it been done in increments, 4 to 5% per year, now we're talking 20, then 7% for the next 10 possible. I just can't, as a homeowner myself, I mean, it's going to be a struggle. And you've got people on fixed incomes, and I mean, I'm just looking at these projections. I mean, I know there had to have been some inclination that something of this magnitude would take place down the road. I mean, you can't be ignored. And I know it's no fault of yours because you're new, but anybody in this capacity, I would think, would know, hey, it's coming. Now it's here, and taxpayers are having to. I just can't. I'm sorry.
Well, I think my point is that we want to use this American Rescue Plan effectively. And, when you're looking at $9 billion to the state and the city's getting $8.7 million, I think there's a lot of other money out there if we lobby appropriately that we can get to fix this. And it's all over eastern North Carolina, those other cities included. So, even the county, its Genoa water system, a sewer system, needs to be addressed. So hopefully we can do our part and we can get some of that money.
We also did not do any tax increases at the same time, so that's just same problem.
Mike Wagner's here if you have any specific questions on some of these requirements. But are there any other questions or discussions?
Mike, do you have anything to add?
Good evening. If I had anything to add, I would say the quicker we can prepare to utilize these funds, it's very important. Whatever you've read in the news, You know, the cost of groceries went up 6% last night. The word on the street that I'm hearing from engineering firms is they don't know how they're gonna get all these projects done in 3 years. It's not just the city of Goldsboro, it's other municipalities and other cities across the state and across the country. It's a small amount of money. $8 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's a small amount of money compared to the needs of our system. And the quicker we can, you know, reinvest in that system, the more money we'll save on the back end.
Like, what are we doing, Big Cherry and Little Cherry? Is that that's that line?
Well, that line is a bypass line for some failed manholes. The manager had in his presentation project number 3, which is the Big Cherry, Little Cherry projects.
Yeah,
you know, we received a loan for essentially 0.1% to work on that $3 million project. But if you recall, I previously talked about, you know, that Asadra loan was a grant program, and we did not qualify for any grant or principal loan forgiveness because our water and sewer rates are not high enough. And so that's the difference between getting grant money or them saying, raise your rates and pay for it yourself. But we're trying to move forward with this. This is another project we can't move forward on. We're asking for an extension until we get the audits submitted.
This has potential for a lot of problems if it's not fixed.
Yes, right now there's a force main that runs right underneath the Neuse River. That and several other projects. I mean, in November of 2019, we were presented with an engineering report of $33 million in sewer projects that needed to be done yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And we're already 2 years past that, so everything's continuing to degrade. Yes, sir.
That's the
Mr. Wagner,
one that bothers.
Are you, and maybe Mr. Salmon can answer this too, when you spoke to the rate increase, that 20%, would it be a difference between the 17.5 to get us to 20, or are you saying an additional 20? So we did 17.5 last year, it'll be 20 this year.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
It'd be an additional 20, but as I was trying to show in the slides,
Right.
Stantec, the corporation or the company that's helped us here, says they can recommend getting it, you could get it down to 15 if you were to invest in the number 1 and number 2 priority, which is helpful. I mean, in my mind, this is the best way to help everybody, whether you're a citizen or a business in the city of Goldsboro. Eventually, we're going to save you some tax money and rate increases by addressing this stuff with the money that's coming down from the federal government right now.
Now,
Any further questions?
is there a deadline on this, like as far as?
Well, I think we will include it in the budget cycle and bring it to your, if council would agree that this is the way we should move forward, it'll be part of my budget submission.
Thanks, sir.
Good night.
Are you gonna, I don't have any questions for you, like, I'm sorry. Mr. Salmon, are you gonna, is this, and I might have missed it, forgive me. This is just a portion of you're just presenting a portion of what you wanna do with that funding, or this is it, this is the projects?
Well, I think, you know, we have to look at as I mentioned, the number 1 priority is kind of fill in the back hole of the general fund. We shorted the fund almost $1 million last year.
So budget, infrastructure, and regional partners are
Correct.
your focus?
Yes, with this 8.7 million. As I was mentioning, there's lots of other funding that's coming down. We don't have the specifics on it yet for those other programs that were mentioned in this slide. Right there. To include 908,000, I believe, was the number for homeless issues.
Right. 9,000.
And Octavius has been my right-hand man on this here, doing all this research. We will continue to do it.
And then approximately 90,000 for the homeless that we should be getting.
908, almost a million, 908.
900, 900,000.
Which will do a lot, obviously.
So, any other questions?
And the county's getting additional funds for schools, is that correct?
Yes, I don't know how that relates to the 23.9 million I spoke of.
But I think there's some separate money there.
For instance, on this slide, you'll see 3.6 billion for K through 12 in North Carolina school systems. And that's a lot of money to be spread down.
So as I understand from your presentation, the last part of it, this is what you want to put in the budget in terms of how this money is
Right.
spent.
So, you know, this 4.375 million that comes to us here in the next week will be put into a separate fund for the American Rescue Plan. And then we will draw on it as we figure it out going forward here. For instance, the priority project number 1, phase 3 sewer, 5.2 million, is probably phase A and phase B, right? Phase A being in this next fiscal year to include the engineering portion of that and whatever we can do within the fiscal year to get that project started. And then when the next 4.375 million comes in, it'll be in the next fiscal year's budget.
Any further comment? All right, sir.
Okay, thank you. So
All right, sir.
now, consent agenda item
Yes.
F, I believe. Right. So staff amended the city code of ordinance, chapter 111, amusements to include carnivals as discussed at the last council meeting. We eliminated the kiddie carnival limitation because we're allowing carnivals. We included approval by the city manager as discussed. We are requiring $5 million general liability insurance as recommended by our insurance carrier. The location will be in accordance with zoning requirements, and the operations will be between 9 a.m. and 10 p.m., consistent with other public events.
Okay, we had the ordinance
Yes, and
reviewed.
the ordinance has been reviewed by the city attorney, the finance director, myself, and other staff. Any questions?
Any questions?
All right. So the time is,
We
Mayor
got
Pro
10
Tem,
minutes.
Can I ask that you guys look at page 3 or amend page 3 of the minutes? I forgot to update the location, so if we can just change it for March the 15th. The copy that I submitted to you guys said City Hall Edition. If we can just update that to say Council Chambers, City Hall, 214 North Center Street. If you guys are okay with that.
So we need a motion to approve the
Amendment,
amendment?
Yeah.
please.
Okay. Would you repeat the change?
Sure. On page 3, under City Council meeting, if you'll update that to reflect Council Chambers, City Hall, 214 North Center Street.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the March 15 meeting minutes as presented by the clerk?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, please.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
and I don't know if you want to do closed session now or later, but we have potential litigation, and I believe you have minutes. Melissa, is that-
We've
Yes,
got
we have 2 seconds.
9 minutes before 7 o'clock. So let's do it at the end of it. Unless we can get it in quickly.
We can do it at the end of, the 7 o'clock session.
Yeah, where it is on the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. At this time, we'll recess for, till 7 o'clock.